Now that I've drawn a few dachshunds in my life, I think it's probably one of my favorite dogs to draw. Between the mixture of colors that are actually in the fur, and then the way that the ears just really stand out with every single different dog but the same breed, it's just absolutely fun to draw ultimately. So starting with the eyes, of course you could see I used some green, I used some orange, and then now I'm using a little bit of some brownish, almost like a pink tone for the water teardrop duct shape part. And what that does is it helps to actually contrast between the eyeball itself and then the rest of the eye. So with the mixture of colors, there's going to be a variety of browns, pinks, orange, and even just a little bit of some blue tones in there too. So just watch and see how I actually apply all of this. So you can see the eyebrows have a lot of some orange tones in there. So I wanted to implement that first, and then continuing on with the actual texture and the direction of the fur. So for the first couple of layers, there's not a whole lot of details that need to be applied, but I wanted to make sure that I'm actually working with the pattern that's happening in this fur, because with each dachshund there is a little bit of a different shape and pattern going on, and even the colors too. So I want to make sure I have that down before I really start to apply detail. That way the proportions are accurate to this particular dog. I also use this mineral spirit oil to help blend everything together. It also helps to saturate the colors. If you've watched my other videos, I explain a little bit more in detail, but that really is one of the most helpful tools to use alongside color pencils. And if you're interested in what kind of materials I use, you can also check the link down below for materials list ebook. One of my favorite color pencils is this Burnt Sienna by Faber-Castell. It really starts to make the portrait look a little bit more vibrant. It applies some red tones along with the brown tones incorporated in it. So I really love applying that just in some areas, but not make it a main feature. I also use a very light pink color pencil. It's almost white. What that does is it helps to kind of lighten up some areas, but still make it more warm tone instead of cool tone. Because if you're just using pure white, it will really cool it down a little bit too much and make the portrait not look nearly as much alive. Now you can also see I used a little bit of some green in there, and what that does is it kind of helps to implement some of those natural colors that are being reflected from the environment. If I don't apply that, I've noticed that the portrait just looks a little bit more fake and a little bit more saturated. But when I start to apply some more green tones, and that can be any kind of green, it can be just more of the earthy tone, more of a grayish green, something like that. But whenever I apply that, I notice that the portrait just looks a little bit more alive, as if the dog is actually standing there with you. So each nose is different too. So this one has a lot of pink tones and orange tones in there. So I really applied just similar colors that I was actually using throughout the rest of the portrait. That way it does tie in and it doesn't just stand out from the rest of the dog here. And I did want to make sure that I have a nice highlight at the top of it as well, because you really want to make sure there's a nice contrast between the highlights and the lowlights. And that really does apply to pretty much everything in the whole portrait. So be mindful of, okay, where is the sun coming in from? Where is it lighter and where is it darker? And work on those features. That's going to be one of your first things to think about. If you're having a hard time seeing the tooth of the paper and it just looks like it's not quite complete of a portrait, that's okay. Really, all it is that you just need to keep going. Just keep applying those layers. I do suggest investing in some mineral spirit oil. That way you can also blend a little bit better. That way you don't have to use nearly as much pressure and as many layers with your color pencils, because over time that will definitely start to hurt your hands, and that's from personal experience. So the mineral spirit oil really helps solve that problem for me. And if you you can just look on Amazon, but you can also look it up in my ebook to get the direct link. The ear is actually the main feature in this portrait here, so I really want to make sure it is perfect as much as possible. So I did apply some red tones in there and some pink tones as well before I started to really apply any detail with the browns and even with the highlights. So I'm actually blending the highlights and the lowlights together, and you can see that the tip of the ear at the bottom has some nice little highlights going on that actually emphasizes that curve that happens with the ears at the very end. So it makes it look a little bit more like it's smooth and it's coming up from the neck there. And so that neck also needs to be a little bit darker than the ear itself because that's where the shading is. Now this is not how it's going to ultimately look, so I'm going to blend the darker areas a little bit better, and you'll see the adjustments that I make towards the end. So you don't have to necessarily finish one main feature before moving on to the next, but I do like to make sure I at least have a good understanding and a good grounding before I move on to the next section. I do think the hardest part about drawing portraits in general is really just keep going, having the patience to be able to keep going. And really my motivation ultimately is these are pet portrait commissions. I want to be sure that I have a perfect portrait to be able to show my clients, because I love to see the reaction when they actually see that, hey, this is my pet, this is my dog, like she captured every single feature about my dog. That is my biggest motivation, is getting to see the client's reaction. So if that's something that you don't necessarily have right this minute, that's okay. Maybe it's something more of, I want to be able to complete this and be happy with my own work by myself, or I love getting to share my work, so I'm going to complete it and share with others just to have their reactions too. But I would say the most important reason why you keep going and you keep trying and getting better and better is because you're doing it for yourself ultimately. You want to get better for yourself, and that is really why I love doing these portraits, especially the wildlife portraits for myself, because I love the whole process. I get to sit there and enjoy the relaxing process. And now it did not start out relaxing, I will say, but eventually I got there, and it is beyond enjoyable for me to be able to just sit down and draw for about an hour or two at a time. And if you're not there just yet, I promise you, you will get there eventually. It's just a matter of time and practicing. Just keep practicing and keep exploring different colors and different methods, whatever works for you as well. Because this method, I don't really see a whole lot of people use. Other people use different methods and different tools. But whatever works for you is what is going to be the best for you to feel motivated to continue drawing. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you want to learn to draw your own pet portraits, I have a 8-week program where it's super in depth, where you can learn to draw your own pets.